Is you alright? Is you cool? You okay? Like what? Motherfuckers be making up excuses off of how they already feeling. If you already feeling like that, that's it, how you feeling like.
Also known as Key, died here Sunday. Now friends are remembering her, how they loved her, and they want her killer.
Kierra McGee never made it home. A woman gets a video call in the middle of the night. It's her daughter's friends, and they're frantic. They can't wake her up. Belinda Ayers looks at her phone and sees her daughter Kierra lying there, lifeless, and in that moment, her entire world changes. Hours earlier, that same daughter had FaceTimed her mother, laughing, showing off her outfit, telling her she was headed to a friend's birthday party. Today, we're breaking down the murder of Kierra McGee, a Kansas City woman known to thousands online as Key, and a case that police still haven't cracked. Before we get into it, if you find this kind of investigative breakdown valuable, take a second to like this video, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to Real True Crime Analysis with notifications turned on. It genuinely helps this channel keep covering cases like this one, and I'd really appreciate you being part of that. Okay, let's get into what happened to Kierra. Kierra McGee was 35 years old, though a few outlets have listed her as 33 or 36, and lived in Kansas City, Missouri. If you spend any time on social media in that city, there's a decent chance you'd come across her. She had built a following of more than 20,000 people, and she opened her videos with a phrase that became something like a personal brand, key to the city. Her parents described her as a go-getter, someone who threw herself into whatever she wanted to do, always leaning toward the positive, a music entertainer, a self-promoter in the best sense of the word, the kind of person who makes an impact without even realizing how far it's reaching. That impact became painfully clear after her death. Her mother later said she started getting calls from people in Las Vegas, Detroit, St. Louis, New York, cities she never expected to hear from. "I didn't realize how much this city loves my daughter," she said. It's one of those details that tells you a lot about who Kierra was to the people around her, even before you know anything about how she died. She wasn't just a name in a headline. She was somebody's whole world, and to a following of strangers online, she was still somehow familiar. That's not something every online creator manages to build. And it says something about how genuine she came across, even through a screen. So let's walk through what we actually know happened that night, because in cases like this, the details matter, and the order they happened in matters even more. It was early Sunday morning, August 2nd, 2026. Sometime around 3:30 to 4 a.m., gunfire broke out in a parking lot in the historic northeast area of Kansas City, near the intersection of Independence Avenue and Van Brunt Boulevard. Specifically, the lot belonged to an O'Reilly Auto Parts store. Now, this wasn't some random deserted lot. Police believe there were as many as a few dozen people present when the shooting started. That's a significant detail, and we'll come back to it because it shapes almost everything about how this investigation has unfolded since. A Jackson County Sheriff's deputy happened to be nearby and heard the gunshots. That deputy responded to the scene almost immediately, arriving around the same time as officers who'd been dispatched after 911 calls came in. When they got there, they found an adult woman unresponsive in the parking lot. That woman was Kierra McGee. Despite efforts to save her, she was pronounced dead at the scene. According to Kansas City police, the preliminary investigation indicates that Kierra had been in that parking lot with an unknown number of other people when one or more suspects began shooting, and she was struck. That phrasing is important, and I want you to sit with it for a second. One or more suspects. That means police aren't even confirmed on how many shooters were involved. And an unknown number of other people means this wasn't an isolated, quiet moment. This happened in a crowd, in the dark, in the middle of the night, on a weekend when a lot of people were out. According to her parents, Kierra was on her way to a friend's birthday party when this happened. Whether that party was connected to the gathering in that parking lot, or whether she was simply passing through on her way somewhere else, hasn't been made clear by investigators. That's one of the first open questions in this case. Was she at her intended destination, or caught in the middle of something happening on the way there? It's a distinction that changes the entire shape of the story, and right now we simply don't have an answer. Here's a detail that stayed with a lot of people following this story. Belinda said that when she arrived at the scene, there was no ambulance, and there wasn't one the entire time she was there. Now, to be clear, we don't know the full context behind that. Emergency response situations can be complicated, and timelines from grieving family members at chaotic scenes aren't always going to match up perfectly with official records. But it's the kind of detail that raises questions for a mother standing at the place her daughter died. Does that seem like something investigators should be able to clarify? It's worth asking, and it's the kind of thing that, fair or not, tends to stick with a family long after the initial shock fades. Let's talk about what investigators have actually released, because in cases like this, it's important to separate what's confirmed from what's assumption. Kansas City police have said that homicide detectives and crime scene investigators canvass the area for witnesses and search for surveillance video while processing the scene for evidence. That's standard procedure, but in this case it carries extra weight because of how many people were reportedly there. A parking lot with a few dozen witnesses should, in theory, generate a lot of leads. Multiple angles, multiple accounts, maybe even multiple phones recording nearby, since that's simply how people behave now when something dramatic happens in public. But as of the most recent reporting, no suspect has been named, no arrest has been made, and no motive has been released. That silence is worth sitting with. Why would a shooting in front of that many potential witnesses still be unsolved days later? There are a few possible explanations, and I want to walk through them as theories, not facts, because nobody has confirmed any of this publicly, and it's important that we don't present speculation as if it were established investigative fact. One possibility is fear. In cases with large crowds, witnesses sometimes know exactly what happened and who was involved, but they're unwilling to come forward because they're afraid of retaliation. Detectives specifically said they still need to hear from anyone who heard or saw something, which suggests they believe there are people out there with information who haven't spoken up yet. That's a common pattern in cities dealing with a high volume of gun violence, where the fear of being labeled a snitch or the fear of becoming a target yourself can outweigh the pull to help solve a case, even one involving someone as widely known and loved as Kierra. Another possibility is confusion. When gunfire erupts in a crowd, people scatter. Accounts can become inconsistent. Different witnesses may have seen different things, or nothing at all, depending on where they were standing and how quickly they reacted. It's also worth remembering that not everyone in that lot was necessarily a stranger to Kierra. Some may have been part of the group, headed to the same birthday party. Others may have had no connection to her at all, simply people who happened to be nearby when shots rang out. Untangling who was who and who saw what is exactly the kind of painstaking work that can slow an investigation down for weeks or even months. A third theory, and this is purely speculative, is that Kierra wasn't the intended target. Shootings that happen in crowded public spaces don't always start with the person who ends up being killed. Stray gunfire, crossfire between other people, disputes that have nothing to do with the eventual victim. We don't have any evidence confirming this is what happened to Kierra, but it's a pattern that shows up often enough in cases like this that it has to be considered. What do you think? Does the setting, a crowded parking lot in the middle of the night, feel more like a targeted act or something that spiraled out of control between other people entirely? There's a fourth angle some people following this case online have raised, though it's worth stressing right away that this one sits even further into speculation than the others. Because Kierra had a public online presence, some have wondered whether her visibility played any role in what happened that night. Was there any connection between her online life and the people in that parking lot? As of now, there is absolutely nothing in the official record suggesting that. Police have not indicated any link between her social media presence and the shooting itself. It's mentioned here only because it's a theory that circulates in cases involving public figures, and it's important to address it directly and clearly rule it out as unsupported, rather than let it linger unanswered in the comment section. What we're left with, then, is a fairly narrow set of confirmed facts surrounded by a much wider set of open questions. That gap is often where true crime cases live for months, sometimes years, before anything solid emerges. It's frustrating for viewers, it's frustrating for investigators, and most of all, it's an ongoing wait for a family that just wants to understand what happened to their daughter. It's also important to place this case in a wider context because Kierra's death didn't happen in isolation. It happened during a stretch that community leaders in Kansas City described as unusually violent, with 4 homicides reported within just a few days of each other. Rosalind Temple, a longtime advocate with the group Mothers in Charge, has spent almost 17 years responding to homicide scenes in the city, ever since her own son's case went unsolved. She spoke publicly after Kierra's death, saying that arguments are currently the leading factor behind Kansas City's homicides, accounting for 37 of the city's 75 homicides so far in 2026. She also made a direct appeal to anyone involved, saying the community knows who they are and urging them to come forward within a short window of time. That statement tells you something about the pattern investigators and advocates are seeing on the ground, even if it doesn't tell us anything specific about what happened to Kierra that night. It's a reminder that cases like hers rarely exist in a vacuum. They're part of a larger, ongoing conversation in cities across the country about gun violence, about witnesses who stay silent, and about grieving families who are left waiting for answers that may or may not ever come. There's another layer to this story worth considering, and that's the role Kierra's online presence played in how the public learned about her death. Because she had built a genuine following, news of her killing spread quickly, not just through local news outlets, but through social media itself, the same platform where she'd built her identity as key to the city. That created a strange dynamic. Her fans, followers, and friends were mourning her in real time, publicly, on the same feeds where she used to post. It's worth asking whether that kind of public grief helps or hurts an active investigation. On one hand, it can generate tips and pressure on witnesses to come forward. On the other, it can also spread misinformation quickly, something her family and local reporters have specifically warned against, urging people to rely only on verified statements rather than online speculation. This is actually a recurring theme in cases involving people with any kind of public platform. The moment someone recognizable is killed, the internet tends to move faster than the investigation itself. Theories form within hours. Screenshots circulate. People who never met the victim start speaking with a confidence that outpaces what's actually been confirmed. That's not necessarily malicious. It's often just grief looking for somewhere to go, and speculation filling the silence that an active investigation naturally creates. But it does mean that as viewers and as a community trying to understand a case like this responsibly, we have to be deliberate about separating what a family has said, what police have confirmed, and what's simply been repeated enough times online that it starts to feel true. That's part of why outlets covering Kierra's story have been careful to note that no official cause of death details beyond the gunshot wounds have been released. No suspect description has been made public, and no arrests have occurred. Everything else at this stage remains part of an active and ongoing homicide investigation. So where does that leave us? We know Kierra McGee was a well-known, well-loved figure in Kansas City's online community, someone with a genuine impact that surprised even her own mother. We know she was headed to celebrate with a friend when her night ended in a parking lot surrounded by strangers in the dark before 4 a.m. We know that despite dozens of potential witnesses, this case remains unsolved, with no confirmed suspect and no publicly released motive. What we don't know may end up being just as important as what we do. We don't know why the shooting started. We don't know whether Kierra was targeted or caught in something larger than herself. We don't know why, with so many people reportedly present, more information hasn't come forward. And we don't know if the answers those dozens of witnesses are holding onto will ever make their way to detectives. Could investigators have overlooked something important in those early hours when the scene was still chaotic and people were scattering in every direction? It's a fair question to ask, even without an answer. Cases like this stay open not because investigators stop looking, but because somebody, somewhere, is choosing to stay silent. If you have any information about what happened to Kierra McGee, Kansas City police are asking you to contact homicide detectives directly or reach out anonymously through the TIPS hotline. Sometimes the smallest detail, a partial license plate, a face someone recognized, a conversation overheard before the shots were fired, is the piece that finally moves a case forward. I want to hear from you. What do you think happened in that parking lot? Do you think this was random or something more deliberate? Let me know respectfully in the comments below. If you found this analysis informative, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Real True Crime Analysis, and turn on notifications so you never miss another investigation. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next case.